What's up, YouTube? This is Rybo at the bench, and today I'm going to do another cut or carry knife review. Tonight it's on the Spyderco Roadie. This is the famous TSA knife that was made to the proposed specs for non-locking blades that could be taken on flights. That was scrapped, and yet Spyderco still released this, which is an awesome thing because this is a phenomenal little knife and very, very surprising little knife. This is very small. Like I said, non-locking slip joint. This is in the orange color, kind of fluorescent orange, really cool color. Just a really funky design from Spyderco. Spyderco is, I think Sal Glesser says they are made for the hand, not the eye, and so they all look a bit funky. I think over time, Spyderco has figured out ways to make that look really cool. And this is just a funky knife even for them. So very interesting. And so let's get into it. The biggest thing you need to know about this knife is that it comes in under 1 ounce. I think I measured 0.9 ounces. It is super, super, super light. You will not notice it in the pocket. It disappears. It's so light and thin that it just falls in the bottom of the pocket, and it's a great backup carry. Or if you're going to a nice event or something where you can't really wear something with a clip, this is a fantastic choice. So let me do a little size comparison. Obviously the Delica 4, it's a good bit smaller than that. So let me bring in the Dragonfly. Now we're in the ballpark. Pop that out. So this is the Victorinox Pioneer. Always forget that name. It's another slip joint knife. It's quite a bit smaller. And then since we're talking about slip joints and non-locking, let me bring in another non-locking knife, the Gerber Paraframe. So it's supposed to be a locking knife, but as I mentioned in one of my last videos, it does not anymore. It's a terrible knife. Sorry, Gerber people. I know you'll light up the comments, but it's just not a great knife. But now we're kind of in the ballpark of size, just so you get an idea. But the Dragonfly is not too far off. You can see in terms of usable blade length, you still have a little bit more on the Dragonfly, but you're pretty close. What you're getting is a little bit of width and kind of comfort, ergonomics in the handle. You're getting a lock, etc. But you're kind of in the ballpark there. So that is the size comparison. So let's get into things that I really, really like about the Roadie. So things I like, design, first of all. So like I said, this is a Sal Glesser design. This is a fantastic design. It's very different, but it is just very intuitive. When you grab this knife, you know exactly what to do. I think this is what Spyderco originally did on their knives back in like the 80s, whenever they started, is they had kind of a divot there with some abrasive, and they eventually moved to the Spidey hole, which on something like this, it cuts down on weight and it just gives you more to grab onto. But like I mentioned in the Spyderco bug review, it doesn't really make sense on a small knife. And so it's really cool that they did something like this. It's funky, it's very different. Not everyone is going to like the way it looks, but I can tell you everyone's going to like the way that it works. Something like this is just way, way better than a nail nick that you would find on a traditional slip joint. You can see something like this, which has been used and loved for years by people. It's just not that enjoyable to use. If you're having to get in here and dig this out, especially on a multi-tool, you can't really tell, which one of these is for my tool. I've often pulled the wrong one out. Even on the Gerber, you have, I think, what is a nicer nail nick here, where you have a little bit more ramp and a little bit more kind of meat to get into, but it's still just not very enjoyable to use. This is a joy. 100% of the time that you go to open this, it's just going to pop right open. And so that's really, really nice. So overall design, it's fantastic. The ergonomics are just phenomenal for a knife of its size. If you look at the Para 3, and you look at the Dragonfly, you can see some design similarities in the finger choil and overall ergonomics. And what's amazing about that is I can get all 4 fingers on this Para 3. I can take the Dragonfly, and with that finger choil, I can comfortably get all 4 fingers on the Dragonfly. And what's shocking is, for a knife this small, I can get all 4 fingers pretty comfortably on that blade. 3 fingers just is unnatural. 4 fingers works perfectly here. I often find myself cutting open boxes using a finger up here to brace. That is super comfortable because your other 3 kind of fall in line behind there. But overall, I mean, it's just a phenomenal design, and the fact that they can make something so small that's non-locking, has a nice sized blade, easy to open, and the ergonomics allow 4 fingers on the handle is just fantastic. You know, they've done it again, just phenomenal, phenomenal design. I love the overall funkiness of the design. It's not like something you've ever seen before. Definitely an eye catcher. My wife hates it. I think it's awesome, but you know, no surprises there. Blade shape, it's just a very, very practical blade shape. This is probably the thing I'm most surprised about is how practical this blade has been. Kind of a sheep's foot, you know, blade there. On something like this, you know, you get this kind of spear point. It looks a lot cooler. A lot of people are going to be drawn to this kind of tactical design, but in reality and in practice, you know, using this to cut open boxes, cut open letters, things like that, that's what it's made for, and it excels in that. I mean, this is a phenomenal blade for actual small everyday carry tasks, and it has definitely surprised me. You know, that is probably the biggest surprise of this knife is how just phenomenal this blade shape is. It has a slight curve to it, you know, nice broad blade for the size, and that sheep's foot is just fantastic. So big fan of that. Also a big fan of how thick the blade is. You know, some people may be turned off on a small knife, how thick that blade is. Let me put it up next to like the Victorinox, which is a much bigger blade, but just so you get an idea of blade thickness, it's quite a bit thicker. And so some people may be turned off by that, but I absolutely love it. I love how much it tapers down. I think it's not only does it look nice, it gives some weight to snap closed and to kind of grab onto. I think if this was any thinner, it would be very hard, or at least a little bit harder to grab onto to open up. And so I really like that. I think it overall just gives it some heft. It kind of helps with the balance of the knife, you know, just to balance the handle with a smaller blade like this. I think that's really nice. It snaps open. That's another thing I really like about it. So when you're pulling this open, I'm gonna let you hear this. Just absolute confidence there that it's going to open and it's not going to go anywhere since it's non-locking. It just has a very satisfying snap open, which I really like. I love that they did the lanyard hole here. That's something that they could have easily taken away on such a small knife just to save space, but I think that's really helpful, especially it's going to be deep in the pocket. You may want something to help you carry it. And then I love the color. This is a really cool fluorescent orange. I've never seen anything quite like this on another Spyderco. It's a little bit different. I had to throw on the 011 just so you get an idea of the color difference here. You have a kind of a flat orange here, almost like a fruity orange here, and then you've got this fluorescence here, which I think is really, really cool. Just a really fun color. So those are the things I really like. The things I'm not so fond of, number one, and probably the biggest, is the grind. I am not a huge fan of this grind. I think it is, I don't know, it's too shallow, I guess. You know, I've had some tasks like cutting open mail where I've just gotten off track a little bit. And so overall, just not a huge fan of the grind on this. I think it'll get much better. I think when I resharpen it and when I kind of rework the grind a little bit, it might get better. But you can see on something like the Dragonfly, which granted is a thicker blade, you've just got a much thicker grind there, and I think that helps with a lot of tasks. So that's one thing that I haven't been super impressed with so far. Besides that, Spidey hole I think is just really dumb. I get it, they're Spyderco, they do Spidey holes, but you know, whatever. It doesn't really serve a purpose. It's only partially exposed when the knife is closed. You know, you could have left it off. Everyone knows there's a Spyderco with that hole right there. It's such a funky knife anyway. It just kind of throws it off to me. If that wasn't there, this would be like almost the perfect knife to me. Some other cons: lack of colors. So I said I love this color. You know, there really aren't a ton of other options. There's a blue, there is a gray, a black, maybe a red. I can't remember right. I would love it if Spyderco were to do a whole line of different colors, maybe some different steels. If they did a green version of this, like this, or a teal version, I would be all over that. I think it's a perfect knife to kind of do some funkiness with, and that would be really cool. So that's kind of a con, but this color is fantastic. And then finally, the biggest thing, or maybe second biggest, I said the grind was the biggest thing. The second biggest thing that I do not like about the knife, and I think that this is starting to go away, but it's very hard to close. Something my wife picked up on, something I picked up on as well. When you open it up, it is non-locking, but it sure feels like it's locking. I mean, that I'm applying some pressure right there, and that thing's not going anywhere. And in fact, I've often had to just use a table or something to push. It does have a half stop, which is pretty strong, and so that's really nice. And so you do have some confidence, and honestly, a lot of times I use something like this because you're gonna push this finger choil into your hand anyway before the blade. And it has a half stop right there. That's a pretty strong half stop, so I really don't have any fear doing that. But it is a little bit hard to disengage, especially for someone who's not a knife person. My wife thought, she was like, how do I unlock this? I can't figure it out. And I was like, oh no, it's just a slip joint, just push it closed. And she got frustrated and just gave it to me to do. So that's kind of one downside. I think it's loosening up a little bit, but out of the box it was super, super, super hard. So not a great thing, but not too bad. Overall, it's a $52 knife, I think, and so it's a little bit expensive for people. But overall, this is a strong, strong carry to me. I absolutely love this knife. It arrived. It's definitely the weirdest knife that I own, but it is so cool. It is very, very practical. It falls in the pocket. It's a great second blade or kind of office carry. It is super, super practical blade shape for cutting open packages, that kind of thing. I absolutely love it. It's become a daily carry for me. It will be a daily carry going forward. I cannot imagine any gentleman folder type thing unseating this, especially when you consider you get all of this at under 1 ounce. So, strong carry for me. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.